So it's Christmas Day, but is it really Christmas Day? This is a couple questions that you've asked here recently. Are we celebrating Christmas on the right day? A little bit more on this in a moment more. Okay with people questioning, oh, well, this is tradition, and the assumption is, oh, it's not correct, or oh, they just made that up. But don't forget that tradition is often rooted in people who were actually around when these things happened. So where I can come and make my pronouncement 2,000 years later that they're crazy, or that I can read the languages better than the ones that were native to them, we have to always be very careful with that. Now, modern scholarship can bring all kinds of great new things to light and put together a lot of pieces from a macro perspective and be able to give good perspective. But when it comes to dating the time of Christmas, I just want to remind you that yes, it is very possible, and I dare say even probable, that the date that we celebrate for Christ's birth, December 25th, is probably pretty accurate. Some people say that, it was taking over other festivals back in the day, the pagan festivals. Well, there was one, the Saturnalia festivals, but they ended, they were like December 17th, and normally they would end, according to the records, by December 23rd, so it doesn't really come into fight. The main one I think that people talk about is the Unconquered, the Invictus. If you read the history on it, and please read the history, it changed over time. Apparently there was some beefing up of it when Julian the Apostate kind of took over as emperor. But the earliest records we have of that, in general, as a historical place, is the mid-4th century. That's not a very old festival for the sole Invictus, the unconquered sun, which is this birthday of the unconquered sun is apparently developed and organized later. So it's not really something that should conflict with us. Actually, people say that it was probably the apostate was probably one trying to break down the Christian celebration of the nativity, of the birthday of our God. So that one doesn't really fly anyway. But the way that we begin to, if you want to know how we get to December 25th in general, because the scriptures don't come out and say December 25th or whatever in the years they would have used, that doesn't come out and say it explicitly. So we don't have it explicit, so that we're not afraid of coming out to say that. But most of the time how it's calculated is it goes back to John the Baptist. So we know the experience of Zechariah and going into the temple when he was performing his priestly duties. And long story short, you can kind of narrow that basically to late September, the conception of John the Baptist, to late September, early October. And so when you play that out, you get his late June birth. That's why even in the church today, we still celebrate the birth of John the Baptist on June 24th. So we have that, and then if you take in the account, especially in Luke, of knowing that he's 6 months older than Mary, so when Mary, and even your cousin thought to have been barren, is now 6 months with child, and then she leaves in haste. So from June, the 6 months, you can play right into December 24th, 25th, that area. So is it possible? Very possible. These are things that are, if you pull back 9 months from that, you get March 25th. March 25th, not only what we have celebrated in tradition of the Annunciation to Mary, but there's also this lining up of dying on the same day that one was conceived. So this timing, being able to do it, either conceived or born, but these two beginning to line up. And that's still the feast day that we hold here and have for the longest time. There are some, too, if you read the early church fathers, there for the most part, they're in this time frame, time period. There was a competing time period up to Epiphany, where in the East, some places celebrated Epiphany as the birthday, but then very early on, they came together for that, the December 25th date. But even some of the early church fathers, they talk about how that the census records before Rome was sacked by the Vandals and Goths into the beginning of the 5th century, late 4th century, there were records. You could go in and find the census records and be able to pull when the census was and be able to know, and they talk about being able to verify even then their dates. Some of the challenges to this, I mentioned the other festivals that we try and replace. One of the other ones too that caused some confusion is, if you ever heard of the guy Josephus. So Josephus dated some of Herod's life and death a little different. What we come to find out about that, though, is that Josephus wasn't very good with dates. He's contradictory in a lot of different places where he picks dates between some of his writings, either in the Antiquities or some of the other ones that he pulls out and uses. So whenever you stack all the evidence together, you have to be able to come and say, yes, it's very possible and even probable. Do we have exact places and the exact dates and the places at that exact time? No, we don't. But tradition has put together, has held this piece, and all of the evidence, when you place it together, makes it very probable. Even the shepherds being in the field, there's a lot of great research, even by our own, the priest here in the diocese, Father Dwight Longenecker has put together a lot of that in the writing of his book on the Magi, saying there are lots of different breeds of sheep that would have been out at that latitude. Israel's latitude, they say, is basically Texas. We're not talking about Greenland or Russia. So the climate was one where they would be out and they would be within the caves in that area. Even now in Italy, in those places, and at that time there's writings from that time of Italian herders and things, and those are even more north. So all these things are answerable, is what I want to say. So anyway, those are all a bunch of different pieces. Take that, shake it up, throw it on the floor and say, hey, okay, yeah, it's possible. But when it comes to Christmas, should you let people push you around on, well, it's an obvious fabrication of the church and tradition doesn't count? Don't think so. It's not the way things work. So the democracy of the dead continues to speak. Hope that's somewhat helpful. I know it's very general, but hopefully it addresses in a general way some of your specific concerns. All right. See you next time on A Moment More.